everybody, this is Garrett with Earth and Time, and today I'm taking you to one of my favorite places anywhere, and somewhere that has a lot of history for me. Welcome to CALICO Ghost Town in Southern California. Now, this is a place that since I was a little kid I've been coming to. Some of my earliest memories are actually of this ghost town back when I was around 3 years old. But not just that, but this was also the spot of one of my first full-time jobs, or I guess part-time. I worked 2 summers here at CALICO Ghost Town as well, and I actually haven't been back here in over 16 years. So I'm super excited to share this with you. I'm excited to walk around and talk about some of the history here, talk about some of the characters that when I was working here I got to work with. And with all that being said, let's get to it and check out CALICO Ghost Town here in Southern California. So I'll start off with just showing this sign to give you an idea. CALICO Ghost Town. In 1881, silver was found here and became the largest mining camp in California. Now, they not only mined silver here, but they also mined borax out of this area, which is what they used to use for laundry detergent and soap back in the days. And this town was quite booming at one time and eventually became a ghost town really in the late 1890s. And you'll see it's 1881 to 1896. You'll see there's lots of stuff going on in the background, and actually it's a pretty well restored, and it is a restored ghost town. There's 5 original buildings here, and I'll try to remind myself to tell you where those are at as we're going through. However, what they've done is as best they could, they've recreated the town based on photographs and old stories. So it's one of the reasons I'm so excited about taking you back here. As I'm walking up Main Street, Calico here, so what's the story and why was it rebuilt? Well, as I mentioned before, this was a boom town in 1881. They found silver inside of these hills, and millions of dollars of silver at that time. Eventually the silver price would crash, and like so many of these towns in the Old West, a lot of people started leaving. However, they started finding stuff called borax, or what they used to make soap at the time, and they had these big mule trains, and we'll hopefully find a museum and we can talk a little bit more about that. But what really happened here and why we have it today is because of Walter Knott. So Walter Knott, famous owner of Knott's Berry Farm in Southern California, a pretty popular amusement park, he bought this property and decided to rescue it and save it, and actually put somebody in charge of it to actually rebuild it as close to as possible what the original town looked like. Now, there are some original buildings here, and we can see one here, which is the general merchandise store, and you can see the old walls. And if I turn around over here, you can see where there's Lane House is at museum, and we'll go through each of these places as we tour this town. But where I'm really excited to get to is show you where I actually worked at for 2 summers, and then we'll walk through this town a little bit more and talk about some of the history and show you some of my favorite sites here. And now we're coming to my old haunt where I spent 2 summers working, and that is at the Gold Panning Adventure. And so here is where, back in the late 90s to mid 90s, late 90s, I used to teach gold panning lessons, and they've actually changed what it looks like today, but I'll show you the original sketch now. So this is where I spent a couple summers working. Now it's changed quite a bit, and I'll show some other pictures of what it looked like and actually of me working here, and I'll show those now. So you can see the back side of the gold panning, and you'll see they're actually doing some gold panning. There's actually a family there doing that. Oh, it takes me back. One of the things I loved when I was working at the gold panning booth is that sometimes I take a break and I just walk literally right across the road, and I can come over here and look at this amazing geology. So there's a lot happening here as far as the geology goes, and I'll try to talk about that a little bit, but I'll plan on doing at some point a separate episode just on the amazing geology here. I worked my way up past the gold shack down there, past where I entered, and I just want to show the mystery shack here. I also used to give tours at the mystery shack sometimes, and that was a lot of fun. All right, enough nostalgia for now. Next, I'm going to keep working my way up to the very top of the town, and then I'll work my way back down. One of the things I love is all the little flares in here to make it feel like you really are in a ghost town. So this makes it feel like it's an old gas lamp. That's cool. So now I'm at the extreme north end, and there's a couple cool things to see here. One, the old wooden lampposts are cool. You can actually see some old mine tailings up there, but you'll see there's no public access going that way, but we'll see if we can take a look at some of the tailings somewhere else. In fact, there's actually a mine tour here that I'm going to try to take you all on, but you can see some of the cool rocks in this area as well. So a lot of the rocks that we're going to see through this section, a lot of them are volcanic in origin, and the volcanic nature of the rocks actually are what brought in the silver into this area. So when you visit, if you come on the north end, you'll see it's back to Main Street. That's where I just came from, the north end of Main Street. And you can come up here to Lookout Point, which I spent many hours sitting up there eating my lunch when I was working here. All right, I made it up to Lookout Point, and you can see the whole town spread in front of us. But what's really nice is I can pan around and show you the greater area, including, check out the train coming. And we can talk a little bit about the geology and where we're at in the world here. We're in the Mojave Desert, one of the large desert regions in the southwestern US, and this is known as Calico Mountain, and it gets that name because of the various colors that you'll see. Even in the mining tailing piles, you can see how there's variability in the colors, hence the name Calico. Now, these big tailings piles are from the silver mines that were operating along this hillside, including the King mine, which is the largest silver producing mine in the area. If we look down this direction, and you all know I love my rocks, you can see how altered and deformed the rocks are. Now, this is a result of some late volcanoes that came into this area and intrusive volcanics that came into this area that altered the host rocks that were here, which were a series of lake rocks known as lacustrine deposits. And when those igneous bodies came in, those volcanic rocks came in, they actually helped deposit the silver in this area and created some of these amazing colors that you see. We can see a really nice view of some of those deposits that actually been folded in what we call chevron folds. Now, I did another episode on chevron folds that you may be able to see where I was out in the Appalachian Mountains, but here you can really see how they've been crinkled there. And why are they crinkled there? Well, it turns out there's a big fault that comes underneath here. It's called a thrust fault coming up, and that fault's coming off of the Calico strike slip fault. So this is a fault similar to San Andreas that's much smaller, that runs right at the front of these hills that we can see in front of us. That I apologize, I was blocking as we were looking out there, but that's where the fault would run in front of those hills and come through. And we can kind of see where things change out here, and that's where the Calico strike slip fault is coming into the section, and there's a branch off of that that comes from depth in what we call a flower structure, and it creates this crinkling here, or these chevron folds. All right, so we get a nice view from up here at Lookout Point, where, like I said, I used to sit out here. I don't remember them having all this. We used to come out here and sit, so don't do this, but we used to sit out here on this point, but probably, have to be more careful now. But what I do want to show is the town, and you can get an idea you can really see where they've rebuilt a lot of the town. And you can see in the central section, there's still some old buildings. You can see the old adobe. You can see what was, and I still think that's the case, this was the old Chinatown district, was actually down in this little gully here, and there's some little buildings left from that. And you can also see a couple of the other original buildings, Lane's General Store over there, and Lane's house as well. And then there's some other original buildings speckled in here. We'll go take a look at some more of those. So I keep getting, I'll say instead of squirreled, I keep getting geologied or rocked, and I'm just loving looking at what's happening in the hillsides here, where you can see all the different colors, hence the idea of Calico Hills. And really, it gives this painted desert look to it. You can see kind of these light greens and purples and browns. But what's still really fascinating to me is when I was talking about that fault zone that comes up, that crinkles all of these old lake deposits up against the hill here, which is mostly volcanic, or is volcanic. The fault probably comes through, and you'll see these beds, alternating beds in here. The fault probably comes through and maybe splays in here, and so this is kind of where the fault, what we say, daylight here. Now, I don't think this is a very active fault, although we are in Southern California and we all know that it's a very active region. I'm actually not sure what the rate is of reoccurrence here. Okay, from down on Lookout Point, we can walk around and take a look at how some of the old miners lived. And so here's an old shack that's here. And you can see they built this out of rocks and right into the side of the wall and right on top of this section, so they could be close to their mines, they can be close to town, and it was pretty cheap. You didn't have to pay rent if you built somewhere like that. So if you do come here, make sure you wear good shoes for walking around on these rock surfaces, and take your time and just get away from the main town part, head slightly this direction to the east, and see what you'll see over here. Like, you can see where someone started a mine. Maybe they thought they had a vein of something, but it just didn't go very far. They didn't find what they wanted to. And I can tell you right away from being a geologist, probably saw this crack right here, and they thought, well, where you see a lot of fractures or cracks, that's often where the silver would be deposited along. And they probably started digging back, realized that there was nothing there that was indicating silver, and they stopped. And maybe they branched this direction as well because they were seeing some of this rusting or iron color that you all can see here. And these are all indicators for folks to think about, you know, could there be some kind of mineral deposit there? So this is the Maggie mine. It says it's a glory hole. They said a $65,000 glory hole. Well, that doesn't sound like a whole lot of money, but back in the day, $65,000 I'm sure would be the equivalent of millions now. But this is where the Maggie mine was. And actually, you can take a tour through this, but you can't access it from this side. They actually had to make a new hole, and we'll go down there and see if we can go tour the Maggie mine. They actually made it in this building down here. If you want to get an idea how a lot of these miners and folks lived, because they wouldn't build wood houses out here. Wood was actually hard to get. We're in the middle of the desert, so it was expensive. So they would use what was around them. They'd get enough wood, probably for the, as you can see, for the roofs, but they build most of their house out of this rock, and you'll see there's quite a few of them around this area. And we can actually walk up and visit some of these. So let's go take a look at these ones over here, and you can see how the old miners actually lived their lives. And as I'm walking up, you'll actually see the tailings piles from the mine, and they have a bunch of places that say dangerous, warning. There are a lot of mine shafts here. Miners, and we saw the little one back a little ways, but miners were constantly looking for that next big discovery. So they were digging little pits and mines all over the place. So it's very dangerous to go outside of town and start exploring here. So please don't do that. Stay within these boundaries. And can you tell I used to work here? And enjoy the scenery that you can see and visit the places you can. Okay, we're coming up to some of these old homes, and you'll see they used local rocks. And when I come in here, you'll see it was just basically they just dug out a little area along the rock, or maybe it was a natural cave. And you'll see there's actually a bunch of black scolding here. So this is where they would have had their fire source, would have been right in there. So they can, you can see, let the heat out or let the smoke out that direction. But somebody would have lived in here. A miner would have just had a little cot in here, maybe a couple utensils, and this is where he lived, or she lived, as they were doing their mining. And here's another one where you can see another spot. Now this one doesn't have a door anymore. You can see where there's nails out of there, but you can get an idea of the size and what they were living in. Now, what's interesting is there's rock that they're sitting on, I believe is some kind of maybe lahar or volcanic rock related to the volcanoes out here, basically like a mud flow or debris flow. And we can really see that here. In fact, this is a nice kind of breccia or some kind of mud flow deposit or lahar type deposit that probably came off of a volcano somewhere related to what's happening out here. Pretty cool to see that. In fact, you can see actually on this face too, it's another one of these kind of lahar type deposits. Tell me that there's a pretty active volcanic system here millions of years ago. All right, I'm here. I may have to go do the train ride while it's sitting here and show you what that looks like. But first, I gotta show you my old buddies that have been here for a really long time. Here's the donkey or the burro and the miner, and I've actually gone to a donkey museum, and I'll link that up here. It's pretty cool. It's actually in Mesquite, Nevada, the other side of the Mojave Desert from where I'm at. but it's definitely worth checking out if you're ever there, and it's free. All right, I paid my $5.50. I'm excited to be on the train, which I haven't ridden probably in almost 30 years. And I'm excited to see what they've done different, if anything.
Howdy, folks. This is
All right, I'm on the train ride.
This is Annie Rickard, two miners from Calico's heyday. We would like to welcome you aboard the Calico and Odessa Railroad.
Howdy there, folks. Y'all please stay seated as we take a ride together along the...
Well, it wasn't meant to be. We derailed the train, or the train derailed. And so we're all getting off, and I guess that's as much of the train ride as we're going to get. And here's the famous Calico Bottle House. And so as a kid, I remember I was so enthralled with this house and the fact that somebody took so much time to build this. And it really is a piece of folk art. And as a kid, this was never open, but now it looks like they have a shop inside of the bottle house. So I'm so excited, folks, because I've never been on the inside of this building before, and all the times I've been here, and even when I worked here, this was never open. So I'm so excited to be on the inside. Well, that was really cool to walk through and see the inside of the bottle shop. My whole life, it's always been closed, and it's a cute little kind of boutique-y shop that has a lot of interesting artifacts and articles. Really neat to see. Definitely worth checking out if you come here. All right, let's keep checking out the rest of Calico. Here's another old building here, and we can walk in and learn a little bit more about mining. And so this is, I think, one of the original buildings. And indeed it is. It dates back to 1887, the Zinda building. It was the Zinda Gold Mining Company. Although they were looking for silver here. And they have banners in here talking about how they did mining. Some of the big operations. Look at that. Imagine how much timber that took. And getting timber in here was not cheap. I'm loving these old pictures. I've never been in this building before either. The other thing I mentioned is that they mine borates here as well. And borates are used for things like old soap products. Borax, maybe people are familiar with. It was in old, they use it for old washing machines, washing clothes, cleaning supplies. And this was a major area for that as well. In fact, as silver started dying out, they started mining borates out of Calico, which helped really keep the town alive. So we had both silver and borate mines going here. And one of the things that was very famous here were the old mule trains that would come through here, and they call them 20 mule trains, if anybody's ever heard that term before. That was related to these borate mines hauling their borate so they can take them out and actually make borax soap out of it, or borax laundry agents, what they called it. And here's even a little geology lesson. I love it. So it says borate minerals such as borax, colemanite, and ulixite are sedimentary deposits called evaporites that form in hot, dry environments through repeated cyclic evaporation of seasonal playa lakes. If you remembered, I talk about the fact that we're in a lot of the rocks we see are these old lacustrine or lake deposits. And here, they're in what's known as the Miocene Barstow Formation. So this is a world-class site and actually has its own geologic time that's named after this area, Barstow. You can come learn a lot more about Calico and the history here, and more about the geology here as well, and about mining in general. Mining is really what opened up the western United States. Great display in the Zinda house here. I was just going to go over to the bar, or the saloon, and I saw that they had this place open, and what a great place to start your tour if you come here. So back in the day, they would actually do plays in here, and they had kind of like the old throw popcorn, scream and yell. They had the little sneaky villain crawling around behind the folks who were sitting. It was really a interactive play that they would do there, but now it looks like it's a rock shop. I'm going to take a look at that in a minute. But first, I've got to head into, you'll see, 1884 to 1896, the old drugstore, one of the original buildings that are still here, and somewhere where I spent many a lunch break. And as you walk in, check this out. Old roulette wheel. It has a bunch of famous Old West personalities up on the walls. See people like Wyatt Earp, Doc Holliday, Billy the Kid. And you can take a look at the ceiling as well, and you come around this other side and see a number of individuals from Old West history. John Ringo, Wild Bill Hickok, Pat Garrett. They even have a little Old West firearms display right here. Okay, and so when I said I used to spend a lot of time here, I know you're thinking, oh, it's a saloon, Garrett. What were you doing, saloon? I was drinking a lot of sarsaparilla, and today I'm going to get another one. All right, enjoying my old sarsaparilla, although this is not the sarsaparilla I used to drink when I worked here. It was definitely a different, but it's still fun to come back and have a sarsaparilla after all these years, which is just basically a type of root beer. Kind of the original root beer, if you will. So behind the saloon, there's some of these old homes, and you'll see these big metal bowls. So they would actually heat up water in these and use them as a bathtub. So the miners would come down here maybe once a week, once a month, I don't know, however long they took a bath, and they would have this filled with hot water. They would get into it, or warm water. They would get in this big bowl, and then they would take their bath. Isn't that crazy? And I'm sure they had multiple people using that same water over and over again. And this was one of my all-time favorite areas, and unfortunately they have it roped off now, probably because people climbed on the walls and started destroying it. But this was, as I understood it growing up, the Chinatown. So there's a whole series of houses and maybe shops that were all plastered together, literally side by side in these rock walls, lived here and worked out of this little area. And this would have continued down this gully a little bit more. I think they've lost some through the years, but as a kid we play hide and seek in here for hours, especially at night when we were camping here. Although they say there's only 5 original buildings, let's kind of augment that in the sense that there's 5 buildings that you can still go in that are safe. There are actually a lot of ruins and relics of life here in Calico that were preserved and saved. And so you can really get an idea about what it was like to live in an old mining camp in the late 1800s. And they have these little signs around talking about the way it used to be, and you can see the kinds of things. I don't even know what this was, some kind of pipe. And there's just relics from old stoves to old mine equipment to old wagons that are sitting around that you can take a look at. It really creates a nice ambiance. So here's the Lane House and Museum, so we'll go in there and take a look. And this was the original site of Lucy Lane's home from 1885 to 1967, and it was restored in 1979. And Lucy Lane, of course, Lane owned the general store across the way, so you can get an idea about how folks lived. And folks with some money, because being a merchant here, they probably had a bit more income and were able to get nicer things like this couch than most of the other individuals that lived here, like the ones in the rock houses. We're going to walk over to the general store in just a minute, but here's the image of what it looked like on the inside back in the 1800s. This old picture of Calico way back in the day. Look, they even have cars here. So this would have been in the based on those cars, maybe the 1930s. And you can see there's not much of the town left. So this is not too long before Walt probably ended up buying this and restoring a lot of the town. But you get an idea of what buildings and pieces of buildings were left at that time. Oh, and I love that picture. John and Lucy Lane in front of Calico there. They look like a classic Mojave Desert family. And check that out. So this was obviously added much later, and this was probably some kind of closet that they retrofitted to make into a bathroom, because you can tell by the ceiling. So the next stop I'll do is Lane's General Store, and this is also one of the old original buildings and the original general store here. And it's still, if I remember right from when I was younger and working here, it still has a lot of the ambiance and feel for what a general store looked like. So it's just one room that went straight back, and they'd have produce and they'd have articles, things like flour, cornmeal, odds and ends. It was basically truly that, a general store. And my favorite thing, they have candy. And my favorite candy, just in case anybody ever wants to know, is Abba Zaba. And actually you can see how they have tackle for horses. hanging up, and they'd have articles of clothing. Pretty neat. Oh, look, they have pans up here. So all kinds of things that they would have sold at this general store in the 1800s. Still has a lot of the same feel and same smells. And they have a series of other buildings here you can look through. In fact, here's a little museum on come inside and see the way it used to be. So this is an old barber shop, I guess. So this is new since I used to be here. Oh, it's a dentist. Ooh, don't want to have them drill my teeth. And then looks like barber shop. Oh, here's an antique school desk. And look at that little piano. It looks like you put a record on it and play it. Old washing machines and a bathtub, an old Calico. So they just pour some water in, you'd sit in there and just wash as best you could. And then there's even a wooden bathtub as well. As I look through there, it sure makes me appreciate the modern conveniences. And this used to be the old Western melodrama place. So this used to be a theater back in the day, and they did plays. Now it's a rock shop, fossils and minerals. And look, they have dinosaurs. I'm sold. And as I come in, you can actually get, oh, look at this, Calico silver ore. You can come in and get some rocks. So a really cool place. So where they had the theater and the old melodramas, where is now a rock shop, but that rock shop continues to this other side, which always used to be here as long as I can remember. And I always love this wall of agate. Check that out. And they have all these different slabs of agate with a light behind them. Always thought that was amazing. So the old rock shop, which I spent hours in, and I'm sure part of the reason I became a geologist and a historian was because of working at this place and spending so much time here. How can you not? Welcome to the Calico Cemetery, and where we actually have a family friend laid to rest who used to hang out with us here at Calico. So let's go visit our friend Earl, aka Doc Holliday, and explore the cemetery a little bit. All right, when we first enter the cemetery, something that may become pretty apparent is that they bury him under mounds of rocks, right? That's what's out here. This is really tough ground to actually dig into. So the geology is such a way that it actually creates what's called hard pan or caliche zones. So you can only dig so deep. So a lot of the grave sites had to be raised, but you'll see there are quite a few in this cemetery. And here's the resting spot to one of our good family friends, Earl Kelso, aka Doc Holliday. And I'll show you a picture of what Doc looked like from his days at Calico now. So Doc was quite the character and would hang out with us at the gold panning spot, and boy did he have gold fever. He loved to come by and buy gold from us, and he loved to do gold panning. So it's really nice to see that he's laid to rest here in his favorite place, and actually somewhere, I believe he actually lived on property actually within the ghost town for a period of time, if I remember correctly. And if anybody else knows, remembers Earl, please comment down below. Okay, from going to visit Earl or Doc Holliday, we can kind of see there's actually a number of other folks that have been laid to rest up here now. Some folks' names I kind of recognize and some I just have no idea. But really unique place and a nice spot actually to be laid to rest if you look around. And if you're in love with the desert, it's definitely a great place to be. So here's a pan through one last time of the cemetery. I had a moment of silence up there for Earl. I just want to show you this amazing Old West graveyard. I want to thank you all for joining me today to explore Calico. Thanks for listening to my tales about when I used to come up here and actually when I used to work here. I appreciate you, all of you tagging along with me. It brings back a lot of memories coming here. And most of all, I would like to dedicate this video to my favorite desert rat, my dad. So, who helped build the gold pan site that we see today here. So with that being said, if you all enjoyed this video, you all know what to do by this point. Thank you again for coming with me. Everybody take care, and I'll see you all on the next adventure.